Well, first of all, profit and loss diagrams with respect to options are, if you're going to get into options, you at least need to know the basics about them. And the reason is because these things are basically the fingerprints of the different option strategies. The profit and loss diagrams define or tell us how this particular option strategy is going to behave with what's going on in the markets. Coming back to like kind of the beginning of our education with graphs, if you think about it, um, the way that we look at graphs, and I have my marker here set to automatically fade. Let me go ahead and let these fade, and then I'll bring them back in permanent here because I want to give you guys a quick little lesson. When you think about when you were in grade school, we learned how to graph with like this XY coordinate, meaning the X is the horizontal one and the Y is the vertical one. The X one is typically our independent variable. This is the variable that we're going to measure, and it's not something that is affected by anything we're doing. And a lot of times with options, that's the underlying symbol price, probably the most popular. But also sometimes we look at like time, like the number of days to expiration. That's also a independent variable. And then the Y side is our profit and loss. So profit and then anything below the zero line is loss. So how does the option price relate to whatever this independent variable is? Maybe, like I said, it could be the underlying symbol price, or it could be the number of days to expiration. And if it's below zero, that's considered a loss, or another word for loss is risk. And if it's above zero, that's considered a profit. And um, another word for profit is reward. So a lot of times people use risk reward graph as it's the same exact thing as profit and loss diagram. So these things, if you have a stock and you buy a stock, it's pretty straightforward. Wherever you bought the stock price at, if this X independent variable is the stock price, the underlying symbol price, then as the stock price goes up, your profit goes up. And as the stock price goes down, your profit goes down. So that straight line, that defines the profit and loss diagram for just buying a stock. If you're shorting a stock, it's an inverse relationship. It does something like this. As the stock price goes down $1, your profit goes up $1. So that's pretty straightforward. But now when you start getting into options, it can get crazier. And most of the options analysis software, whether you're using something like a Thinkorswim or a Tasty Trade, or you're using something like an options view, any of these softwares that can analyze, they typically have the ability to do a risk graph. So let's say, for instance, let's bring up a particular stock, and let's say that we put a call option. I'll just do an at the money September option, and I'll put it out there into our positions here. There it is. Now, the first thing is I'll show you, it'll draw, I'm just showing you the stock now. So let's look at this. And so as you can see here with just the stock, it kind of is just that main line here. But when I throw the option in, this is buying a call option. You can see that this has its own kind of fingerprint of what a call option that we buy looks like. And if you instead sell it, it takes on a whole different picture. And so option traders learn how to read these common fingerprints, and they learn how over time. So as you can see here, you see this magenta line. The cyan line is the value of the option at expiration. So when this thing expires, this is what it's worth, depending on what the stock is worth. But this magenta line is approximation of what it's worth right now. And so, for instance, you can see here, I can simulate what happens as this thing gets closer and closer to its expiration date in September. You can see that its value right now winds up ultimately on the expiration date becoming the same as that cyan line. So option traders that actually are, in the game and knowing what they're doing, they'll use these profit and loss diagrams in order to really understand how the option is going to behave with the pattern that it's trading against. So if you're going to play with options, I strongly suggest you kind of get into these profit and loss diagrams. They tell you everything about how the strategy you're about to trade will work with the stock and the time and all of that good stuff.
I think that's a great breakdown. And I have one follow-up question, and that is when using multiple options, does the diagram start to pivot? And that's like a secondary way of looking at it when you have, especially with your strategy of legging
Absolutely.
in and having, different time frames involved?
Absolutely. In fact, why don't we even play around with that? So if I come back over here and what we wind up doing is something like a diagonal. And so why don't I just throw one on really quick and you can kind of understand what our strategies look like. I'm going to put one on that's roughly at the money and let's see what happens here. So this is a diagonal. And if we take a look at what this particular profit and loss diagram looks like, you can see that these type of, I mean, we start to get into all sorts of nuances. So what this is basically saying is as the stock goes up to $33, we're going to make the most money, but then it slowly gradually works off past $33 and even more slowly. In other words, each option strategy has its own flavor. This is a diagonal and this is not even a protected diagonal. If we were to add our protective option that we always talk about. So, say for instance, we've got this diagonal in place. A lot of times, what we'll do is we'll use this one out here and make it like a January 2025. We'll make this one more like a September or an August. Let's see, here's August 18th. This is more likely the diagonal that we're playing with, something that looks like this. But then we always add on that protective option so it gets more and more nuanced. But if we add now a protective option, so we'll come back here to our singles and we'll go out to maybe January with our protective option. Boom. And then we'll put let's say a $30. Let's go ahead and buy that. Buy that and get rid of this one. Now you'll see an even neater picture. So now you can see how we've actually got this two uh, two different fulcrums of this profit and loss diagram, and this all makes sense as you get farther and farther into options and what you're trying to do.